I want you to imagine a scenario for a second.
Okay.
You are standing in a museum,
Right.
right? And you are watching someone pick up a priceless ancient vase.
Right.
They look right at you, they smirk, and they just smash it on the marble floor. Shards go absolutely everywhere.
Oh, wow.
It is undeniable. You saw it happen with your own eyes. But because the security camera in the room happened to glitch for like exactly 1 second, the court step in and officially declare that this person didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to ask yourself, does a camera glitch magically fix the vase?
It doesn't. I mean, the vase remains in 100 pieces on the floor.
Exactly.
The physical reality of the universe hasn't changed at all. The only thing that has changed is the official institutional record of that reality.
Right. And that massive jarring disconnect, that gap between a legally mandated outcome and undeniable factual reality is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
We are taking a really microscopic look at a massive sociological and legal analysis document, and it's titled the O.J. Simpson Public Perception Analysis.
It's an incredible piece of synthesis, really, because it doesn't just zoom in on the courtroom mechanics of, the trial of the century.
Yeah.
It zooms out. It looks at the entire 30-year cultural shockwave that followed, breaking down the exact mechanisms of how society processes truth when the legal system completely fails to deliver it.
And let's set the ground rules right now for you listening.
Yeah.
Our mission today is not to sit here and relitigate a trial from 1995.
Right.
We aren't here to take sides on the politics of policing or the media circus. We're acting purely as your guides through this specific document to deconstruct a very specific question.
Which is, why does the modern public correctly perceive O.J. Simpson as a murderer despite his famous legal acquittal?
Exactly. Like, how do we get from not guilty in a courtroom to a unified cultural consensus of guilt?
Well, to answer that, we really have to look at several distinct phases. We'll be walking through the forensic science, the wild differences between criminal and civil law, a truly baffling book deal, and the massive sociological shifts in America over the last 3 decades.
So let's just dive right into the deep end. We have to start with the foundational lens of this entire document. If you don't understand this one core premise, nothing else about this case makes sense.
Right.
A legal acquittal does not mean a person is factually innocent.
It is arguably the single most common misunderstanding of the American legal system. We constantly equate not guilty with innocent, and they are fundamentally entirely different concepts.
I was trying to explain this to a friend the other day. I told him to think of it like taking a pass-fail driving test.
Okay.
Imagine you get in the car, you immediately run 3 red lights, you back over a mailbox, and you parallel park directly on top of a fire hydrant.
A total disaster.
A complete disaster. But the driving instructor suddenly realizes they forgot their official clipboard back at the DMV. Because of a strict procedural rule, they have to fail the test entirely and let you walk away without a grade. Does that missing clipboard mean you are suddenly a flawless, innocent driver?
Of course not. I mean, you're still a complete menace on the road.
Yeah.
It just means the bureaucracy had a rigid rule, the bureaucracy failed to execute its own rule, and therefore it couldn't officially punish you. And the legal system operates on a very similar, intentionally rigid set of rules.
Right.
It is specifically designed to let a guilty person go free rather than risk convicting an innocent one.
Which makes sense in theory. But let's look at the actual machinery of that system, because the document lays out exactly how high the bar is. It starts with the presumption of innocence.
Yes.
The document points out this is implicitly guaranteed by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. What does that actually mean when you walk into a courtroom?
It means you are cloaked in protection. The state, meaning the police, the prosecutors, the full weight of the government, they cannot touch you unless they pierce that cloak. And the tool they have to use to pierce it is the burden of proof. In a criminal court, that burden is beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
The document explicitly notes this is the absolute highest burden in the entire legal system.
And reasonable doubt is such a slippery phrase, isn't it? It doesn't mean beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Right, exactly. It doesn't require absolute 100% mathematical certainty, but it means that if a juror looks at the evidence and can construct a logical, rational, alternative explanation for the crime, they are legally obligated to acquit.
Wow.
The defendant doesn't have to prove they were at home watching TV. They don't have to prove anything. They can just sit at the defense table in complete silence.
Just do nothing.
Do absolutely nothing. The state has to climb an incredibly steep mountain of evidence, and the defense just has to push one single boulder down to create doubt.
And here is a detail from the document that completely blew my mind. Courts rarely, if ever, adjudicate actual innocence. I always assumed, there was some mechanism for a judge to slam a gavel and say, this person is entirely innocent. But standard courts don't have an innocent box to check on the verdict form. It's just guilty or not guilty.
Precisely. The system is entirely binary, and not guilty just means not proven. Now, there are a few very rare, highly specialized exceptions where actual innocence is evaluated.
Like what?
Well, the document mentions a specific protocol. It's called the St. Clair County, Missouri Polygraph Protocol, where a defendant actually has to provide affirmative, proactive proof of their non-involvement to clear their name.
Oh, wow.
But in a standard criminal trial, innocence isn't even on the menu.
But see, the public doesn't operate in that strict legal binary. We are watching this on television, and we are evaluating factual guilt using common sense.
Right.
We look at the totality of the evidence, completely untethered to these strict constitutional burdens. We look at how a person behaves. We look at logic. We look at the whole picture.
Which is exactly why the clash happens. We assume the legal system is a truth-finding machine. We expect a judge and jury to sit down, look at the clues, and tell us the absolute truth of what happened on the night of the crime.
Right.
But the legal system isn't a truth-finding machine.
It's not. Then what is it?
It's a state power limiting machine. Its primary function is to make it incredibly difficult for the government to take away your physical freedom or execute you.
Oh, I see.
So when people get outraged at an acquittal, they are operating on the assumption that the system broke down. But the alternative perspective we have to consider, and what the document points out, is that in 1995, the system didn't break.
It didn't.
No, it worked exactly as designed. It prioritized procedural perfection over factual truth, acting as a safety valve against state overreach.
So if the prosecution makes errors, if they drop the clipboard, the state power limiting machine shuts down the conviction. It's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. A not guilty verdict signifies only that the prosecution failed to meet its rigorous constitutional burden, not a declaration of factual innocence.
Okay, so if the rules of the game are that incredibly strict, how did the defense team weaponize those rules in this specific case? Because the prosecution claimed they had a literal mountain of evidence. How do you push a boulder down a mountain that size?
By entirely bypassing the physical evidence and putting the Los Angeles Police Department on trial instead. They proved that if the investigators collecting the evidence are corrupt, the evidence itself simply cannot be trusted no matter what the math says.
I used an analogy for this, too, when reading through the source. Imagine you are at an ultra-high-end restaurant.
Okay.
A renowned chef prepares a flawless 5-star steak. It's cooked perfectly. It smells amazing. But right as the waiter sets the plate down, you watch that waiter deliberately lean over and spit into your water glass.
Oh, you're sending the entire meal back.
Exactly. You aren't going to sit there and eat the steak. It doesn't matter that the steak itself wasn't touched.
Right.
The environment it's served in is completely tainted. You don't trust the kitchen anymore. The defense basically set out to prove that the LAPD spit in the glass.
That is exactly the dynamic. And the LAPD wasn't just the waiter in this scenario. They were the ones who shopped for the ingredients, cooked the meal, and plated it.
Wow.
The defense knew they couldn't attack the scientific validity of DNA testing itself. The science was sound, so they attacked the environment.
And the volume of evidence they had to discredit was just staggering. The document details the forensics, and we are talking about 108 separate DNA exhibits and 61 individual drops of blood presented over 9 grueling weeks of testimony.
The statistical probabilities presented to the jury were almost unfathomable. Take the blood drops found at the Bundy crime scene right near the bloody footprints.
Right.
The prosecution's experts estimated the error rate on that DNA match was 1 in 9.7 billion.
Wait, hold on. 1 in 9.7 billion. There weren't even that many people on Earth in 1994. How does the jury even comprehend a number like that?
It's really hard, and it gets even more mathematically extreme. Inside Simpson's white Ford Bronco, investigators found a mixture of blood. When they tested it, it contained a mixture of DNA from Simpson, Nicole Brown, and Ronald Goldman. The probability of an error on that specific mixture, 1 in 21 billion.
That is absolute Mathematical certainty.
And that's not all. You had the infamous Rockingham glove found at Simpson's estate, and the bedroom socks found at the foot of his bed, both heavily soaked in the victim's blood. The physical footprint of the crime led directly to his bedroom.
So if you are the defense team, Johnny Cochran, F. Lee Bailey, Robert Shapiro, Barry Scheck, Peter Neufeld, you are staring at a 1 in 21 billion probability. What do you even do?
You deploy a strategy they explicitly called, quote, compromised, contaminated, corrupted.
Let's break those down. The compromise part seems to be about basic incompetence. They put criminalists Dennis Fung and Andrea Mazzola on the stand.
Yes.
These were the LAPD technicians collecting the blood, and the defense gets them to admit that they used plastic bags instead of paper bags for wet blood swabs. Why did that matter so much?
Because wet blood in a sealed plastic bag breeds bacteria, and bacteria degrades DNA. It's a massive violation of forensic protocol, and it didn't stop there. They admitted to leaving this crucial evidence sitting in hot, unrefrigerated police vans for hours in the Los Angeles sun before logging it into the lab.
So the defense successfully planted the seed. The LAPD is just sloppy.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's compromised. Then they moved to contaminated. How did they argue that?
They targeted the LAPD crime lab itself. They focused on a criminalist named Colin Yamauchi.
Okay.
The defense suggested that Yamauchi accidentally transferred Simpson's reference, blood, that's the blood they drew from him at the station, onto the crime scene evidence swabs while working in the lab.
Just by touching them?
Yeah, they painted a picture of a lab so poorly run that evidence was just cross-contaminating all over the tables.
But incompetence is one thing. To explain away the socks and the glove, you need malice. You need a conspiracy. And that brings us to the corrupted claim, the deliberate framing.
This is where the defense brought in a toxicologist named Dr. Frederick Reiters. He testified about a chemical preservative called EDTA.
What exactly is EDTA?
It's an anticoagulant. When police draw your blood for a reference vial, the vial contains EDTA to keep the blood from clotting so they can test it later. It does not exist naturally in those concentrations in the human body.
Right.
Dr. Reiters testified that he found traces of EDTA on the blood from the back gate of the crime scene and on the bloody bedroom socks.
Meaning the blood on the socks didn't come from a bleeding human being. It came from a police test tube, meaning it was planted.
That was the implication. Now, the prosecution pushed back hard. They brought in an FBI agent, Roger Martz, who completely debunked Dr. Reiters.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, Martz proved that Reiters had totally misread the scientific literature. He confused parts per million with parts per billion.
That's a pretty massive math error for an expert witness.
Enormous. Martz showed that natural human blood actually has those same minuscule trace amounts of EDTA just from our diets and environment.
Okay, so he shut it down.
The science proved the blood wasn't planted from a vial. But the problem was the presentation. The science was so dense, so reliant on parts per billion chemical analysis, that the jury was completely overwhelmed.
I mean, I would be too.
Right. The seed of doubt had sprouted into a forest.
And then the prosecution hands the defense a chainsaw to cut down whatever was left of their case. Let's talk about Detective Mark Furman.
Yes?
He was the investigator who famously hopped the fence at Simpson's estate and found the bloody glove. The defense had him on the stand, and under oath, they asked him if he had used racial slurs in the past decade. He looked at the jury and said no.
Which was a fatal trap.
Yeah.
Because the defense had uncovered audio tapes, recordings Furman had made with a screenwriter, proving unequivocally that he was lying. He had used horrific slurs repeatedly. He had bragged about police brutality.
But the actual knockout punch came when they called him back to the stand. Defense attorney Gerald Illman looks Furman in the eye and asks him directly, "Did you plant or manufacture any evidence in this case?"
And Furman pled the Fifth Amendment.
He pled the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination when asked if he planted evidence.
It's astounding.
I mean, put yourself in the jury box. The lead detective on the case just invoked his right not to admit to a felony on the stand. As defense attorney Alan Dershowitz noted in the document, this forced the jury to cherry-pick the evidence.
And you really have to think about the underlying assumption the defense is asking the jury to make here. You look at those DNA odds, 1 in 21 billion. The math is absolute.
Right.
But the defense's brilliant argument is that mathematical certainty is completely irrelevant if the human element delivering the math is demonstrably corrupt.
But wait, let's think about this logically. Furman found the glove, but he didn't collect the blood in the Bronco. He wasn't the only one at the Bundy crime scene.
Exactly.
It would be physically, logistically impossible for Mark Furman to have planted all the evidence across multiple crime scenes under the noses of dozens of other officers.
You are absolutely right. The limitation the jury ignored was logical impossibility. But the law didn't require them to parse out the logistics of a grand conspiracy.
It didn't?
No, the law allowed them to look at the tainted fragments, a racist detective pleading the fifth, plastic bags, hot vans, and discard the entire batch.
Because the waiters spit in the glass.
Yeah.
The environment was ruined.
Exactly. The 1995 acquittal was less an endorsement of Simpson's innocence and more a wholesale rejection of the state's compromised presentation and severe police malfeasance.
Okay, so that explains the 1995 verdict. It was a perfect storm of a high burden of proof and catastrophic police errors. But society didn't just stop there. We didn't accept the acquittal as the final word.
No, we didn't.
And that brings us to the civil trial. What happens when you completely change the rules of the game?
You get a completely different outcome. By lowering the burden of proof, the courts removed the defense's ability to hide behind wild, hypothetical conspiracy theories. And that finally allowed the overwhelming reality of Simpson's guilt to see the light of day.
Think of criminal court like trying to convince a hardcore skeptic that aliens exist.
Okay.
To meet the beyond a reasonable doubt standard, you can't just show them blurry photos or radar data. You basically need to bring a live alien into the room and have it shake their hand.
Right.
But civil court is just convincing a friend that it's currently raining outside. You don't need meteorological barometric data. You just need to point out the window at the wet umbrellas. It is a drastically lower bar.
It fundamentally changes the strategy. In the criminal trial, the defense was suffocated by constraints, but they used the state's burden against them.
Right.
In the civil trial, the family of Ronald Goldman and the estate of Nicole Brown are suing Simpson for wrongful death. The standard of proof shifts from beyond a reasonable doubt to a preponderance of the evidence.
And preponderance basically just means 51% certainty, right? More likely than not. If you put the evidence on a scale, it just has to tip slightly in one direction.
Exactly. But it wasn't just the burden of proof that changed. The entire environment of the courtroom was different. Judge Hiroshi Fujisaki presided over the civil trial, and he clearly watched the circus of the criminal trial and decided it wasn't going to happen in his courtroom.
So what did he do?
He ran a remarkably tight ship. First, he banned all TV cameras, no live broadcasting. He imposed strict gag orders on the lawyers so they couldn't hold press conferences on the courthouse steps.
So no theatrics, no
Right.
performing for the public.
Exactly. But his most crucial ruling was evidentiary. He explicitly prohibited the defense from introducing Mark Furman's racist history.
Really?
Yes. Fujisaki ruled that Furman's past use of slurs was irrelevant to the actual physical evidence of the murders.
Wow. So he completely stripped away the emotional distractions. He took away the defense's biggest weapon.
He did. And without the threat of prison hanging over him, Simpson no longer had the protection of the Fifth Amendment shield.
Oh, because it's a civil trial.
Right. In a civil trial, you can be forced to testify. He was deposed, he was put on the witness stand, he was subjected to grueling cross-examination, and he simply couldn't explain away his alibi. He faltered.
But the absolute nail in the coffin, the moment the civil trial cemented his guilt in the public eye, revolved around a pair of shoes. The Bruno Magli photos. Let's dig into this because this is a remarkable piece of forensic history.
It really is. Back at the criminal trial, the FBI analyzed the bloody footprints left at the Bundy crime scene. They determined with absolute certainty that the footprints belonged to a very rare Italian shoe, a size 12 Bruno Magli Lorenzo style.
Okay.
They were so rare, in fact, that the FBI tracked the sales. Only 299 pairs in a size 12 were ever sold in the entire United States.
Okay, so you have the shoe style and the size. But at the criminal trial, the prosecution couldn't definitively prove that O.J. Simpson owned a pair.
Right. Simpson aggressively denied it. During his civil deposition, he was shown a picture of the shoes, and he famously testified under oath that he would never wear those, quote, ugly-ass shoes.
Right, I remember that.
He locked himself into a denial.
Which was a massive mistake.
Yeah.
Because enter E.J. Flammer and Harry Skull. These are two freelance photographers. They hear about the shoe denial, and they start digging through their archives.
Yeah.
And they produce 30 photographs from a Buffalo Bills NFL game played in September 1993. This is 9 months before the murders.
And what did the photos show?
They show O.J. Simpson walking across the football field wearing the exact, rare, size 12 Bruno Magli Lorenzo's shoes.
The defense was cornered. Their immediate reaction was to claim the photos were doctored. They claimed Flammer and Skull forged them to get a payday.
Of course they did.
But the plaintiffs brought in FBI forensic photography experts. They analyzed the photos and matched 18 distinct features of the shoes in the pictures to the physical design of the Lorenzo style. Every seam, every eyelet matched.
And it gets even better, because one of those photos had actually been published in a small Buffalo Bills newsletter 6 months before the murders even happened.
Oh.
It was completely, undeniably impossible for it to be a retroactive forgery.
Innocent men don't generally lie under oath about their footwear, but guilty men do. The civil jury looked at the photos, looked at the 51% burden of proof, and found him liable for the wrongful deaths.
And the penalty was huge.
They hit him with a massive $33.5 million judgment.
So let's think about how the public digested this.
Yeah.
Because for the average person watching the news, the civil trial feels like the truer reflection of reality. They found him liable. They had the photos. It feels like justice was finally served.
It definitely feels truer to the factual evidence. But we have to acknowledge a counter-argument here about how the legal system works. Civil courts intentionally lack the punitive power of the state.
Meaning they can't put you in jail.
Exactly. They cannot incarcerate you. They cannot execute you. Because the state isn't trying to take away your physical freedom, a lower threshold of proof is constitutionally acceptable. It's just about money. However, finding him civilly liable for damages does not legally overwrite the criminal acquittal. He remained legally not guilty of murder in the eyes of the state, even while being legally required to pay millions of dollars for causing those same deaths.
It's a mind-bending contradiction if you try to map it onto common sense. But in the court of public opinion, the legal nuance didn't matter. The photos were the proof.
Precisely. Stripped of theatrical distractions and relying on a lower burden of proof, the civil trial served as the legal confirmation of Simpson's factual guilt for the American public.
Which you would think would be the end of the story. He loses $33 million, he is publicly disgraced, he retreats into obscurity.
You'd think.
But no. Here is where the saga gets absolutely surreal. We have to talk about the post-trial disclosures and the "if I did it" controversy. Because Simpson's own post-trial greed led him to publish a detailed theoretical confession that absolutely obliterated any lingering benefit of the doubt anyone might have had.
It remains one of the most baffling decisions in the history of celebrity public relations.
It's exactly like a bank robber who pulls off the heist of the century.
Right.
He beats the charges, he gets away scot-free, and then a decade later, he writes a step-by-step instruction manual on how to rob that specific bank using the exact same getaway car, the exact same tools, detailing the exact layout of the vault, but he slaps a tiny sticker on the cover that says fiction.
It's a perfect analogy, and we are moving beyond courtrooms now. The criminal and civil trials were about institutional adjudications.
Yeah.
This phase explores how Simpson's own personal behavior in the court of public opinion actively sabotaged whatever legacy he had left. He did this entirely to himself.
Let's look at the timeline and how he did it. First, he successfully dodged paying that $33 million civil judgment. He shielded his assets. How did he do that?
He moved from California to Florida specifically to take advantage of Florida's homestead exemption laws.
What does that mean?
In Florida, your primary residence is largely protected from being seized to satisfy civil judgments. You can own a massive mansion, and creditors can't force you to sell it. He also relied heavily on his NFL pension, which was protected by federal ERISA laws from being seized by creditors.
So he is living comfortably on Florida golf courses, completely avoiding paying a dime to the Goldman family.
Yes.
But he wanted more money. He was greedy. So in 2006, he collaborates with a ghostwriter named Pablo Fenges, and they secure a reported $1 million advance from HarperCollins for a book titled If I Did It.
$1 million to tell the public how you hypothetically slaughtered 2 human beings.
And the details in this book are sickening. It's not a vague thought experiment.
No.
The book introduces a hypothetical accomplice named Charlie. It details how O.J. and Charlie went to Nicole's house. It describes O.J. ignoring Charlie's frantic pleas to leave the scene. And then it describes O.J. blacking out in a blind rage, dropping the knife, and waking up covered in what the book explicitly calls giant pools of blood.
Naturally, the public outrage was instantaneous and deafening. The idea that a publisher was going to pay him $1 million to traumatize the victims' families again was abhorrent.
It really was.
Following the backlash, News Corp, the parent company of HarperCollins, canceled the book entirely. They fired the publisher and physically destroyed 400,000 printed copies.
But the Goldman family, And I cannot overstate how relentless Fred Goldman is in his pursuit of accountability. The Goldman family saw an opening. The $1 million advance hadn't been paid directly to O.J. Simpson.
It hadn't.
No, it had been funneled into a shell corporation called Lorraine Brook Associates, which is named after his kids.
Ah.
Fred Goldman sues that shell corporation in bankruptcy court. He argues that the corporation is just a fraudulent alter ego for O.J. Simpson himself.
And did it work?
Judge A.J. Crystal agrees. He rules the corporation belongs to O.J., and as a result, he awards the rights to the book entirely to the Goldman family to help satisfy the civil judgment.
It is a masterpiece of legal maneuvering.
It really is. The Goldmans own the book now. They decide to release it through an independent publisher called Buford Books. But they redesign the cover.
Right.
They take the word if, and they hide it inside the letter I in a tiny, almost invisible font.
It is brilliant graphic design revenge.
So when you walk into a bookstore and look at it on a shelf, the title literally just reads, I Did It, Confessions of the Killer. It's incredible. But I have to ask, why? Why would someone who successfully got away with the crime of the century write a book about it?
It speaks to an assumption of extreme, blinding hubris. Simpson genuinely believed he was entirely untouchable. He assumed he could outsmart the public, outsmart the Goldmans, and cash $1 million check while safely hiding behind the word hypothetical.
He thought it was a clever loophole.
He did, but the limitation he ignored was sociological. While the book was technically categorized as hypothetical in a strict legal or literary sense, sociologically, the public didn't care about the word if.
Right, they just read the words.
Exactly. The public read those meticulous, horrifying details and recognized it immediately for what it was. It functioned as an undeniable confession.
He thought he was playing a game, and he lost the narrative completely.
Precisely. The publication and subsequent Goldman family hijacking of If I Did It transformed a cynical cash grab into an implicit, devastating public confession.
And speaking of losing the narrative, that arrogance didn't stop with the book. That brings us to the 2008 armed robbery and posthumous estate battle. Because Simpson's later conviction for an armed hotel robbery and his estate's final settlement after his death provided retroactive proof of his violent nature and his moral culpability.
It completely validated everything his critics had been saying since 1994.
It's like catching a suspected arsonist playing with matches and gasoline 13 years after a major fire. You couldn't prove they set the first fire, but seeing them doing it now, it proves they never lost the spark.
Yeah.
It validates everything people suspected they were capable of doing all along.
That demonstrates the final, real-world consequences of the hubris we just discussed. His perceived invulnerability, which led to the book, directly led to his permanent transition from an acquitted celebrity living on a golf course to a convicted violent felon sitting in a state penitentiary.
And the timeline of the evidence here is almost poetic. It's almost too perfect for a movie.
Yeah.
He is arrested in 2007 for leading an armed raid at the Palace Station Hotel in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And get this, he was arrested on the exact same day that the Goldman family published the hijacked If I Get It book.
The irony is just palpable.
It is.
He claimed he was just trying to steal back his own stolen sports memorabilia from some dealers. He thought he could just take the law into his own hands. But a middleman named Thomas Riccio secretly recorded the audio of the raid.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The tapes captured Simpson shouting, "Don't let nobody out of this room," while his accomplices brandished a .45 caliber handgun.
So he's charged with armed robbery and kidnapping. He goes to trial in Nevada before an all-white jury under Judge Jackie Glass, and he is convicted on October 3, 2008, which is exactly 13 years to the day after his 1995 murder acquittal.
The symmetry is staggering. He sentenced to 9 to 33 years in prison. He serves 9 years before being paroled. He eventually dies in April 2024 of prostate cancer, but the legal battle outlives him.
Right, because of the debt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
His debt to the Goldman family had grown exponentially with interest over the decades, ballooning to $117 million.
That is an insane amount of money.
It is. His estate executor, a lawyer named Malcolm Laverne, initially vows to fight the Goldmans to the bitter end. He says they will never see a dime. But eventually the reality of probate law sets in.
He gave up.
Laverne surrenders. He accepts a nearly $58 million creditor claim to avoid endless litigation.
Which is wild, because the estate only had like $500,000 to $1 million in liquid assets, like a massive symbolic concession. But let's look at how the public viewed this whole Vegas chapter. The underlying assumption was that justice was finally served. He did the crime, he did the time.
But there is a very prominent alternative perspective among legal scholars regarding that trial. They looked at the sentence up to 33 years for stealing sports memorabilia in a hotel room where nobody was injured, and noted it was incredibly severe for a first-time felony conviction.
You think it was payback?
It suggests that the sentence may have been fueled by latent judicial frustration over the 1994 murders. The unspoken question is, was he really sentenced for the robbery, or was the system retroactively punishing him for the murders?
Wow. The system finally catching up to him, using whatever tools it had left to lock him away.
It's a compelling argument. Regardless of the judicial intent, the outcome was definitive. Simpson's armed robbery conviction and his estate's final $58 million concession functioned as the definitive bureaucratic closure to his legacy of violence and evaded accountability.
Okay, we've walked through 30 years of legal battles, book deals, and hotel robberies. We've established that the evidence of his guilt is overwhelming. Which leaves us with one final massive question.
Okay.
If the evidence was always this overwhelming, why was the country so divided in 1995?
That requires stepping back from the timeline of O.J.'s specific life and viewing the entire saga through a macro-sociological lens. The initial 1995 divide over Simpson's guilt wasn't actually about O.J. at all.
It wasn't.
No, it was a proxy war over a systemic police corruption that eventually faded, allowing everyone to see the facts clearly.
I try to think about it in terms of sports. It's like cheering fiercely for a sports team you don't even like, simply because they're playing against a referee who has constantly, historically cheated you in the past.
Yes.
You don't care about the team, you just want the referee to lose.
That is exactly the dynamic. This explains why it took 3 decades for the public to reach the unified consensus we've established today. It wasn't about the DNA, it was about the context of Los Angeles in the 1990s.
Let's look at the polling data. In 1995, the country was fractured. Roughly 74% of white Americans believed he was guilty, but nearly 80% of black Americans supported the acquittal.
That is a staggering divide.
It really is. You look at that and think, two different Americas are watching two completely different trials.
They were, because they were bringing 2 completely different lived experiences into the courtroom. Sociologists like Dr. Michael Eric Dyson and Charles J. Ogletree Jr. provide the crucial context here.
What do they say?
They link this divide directly to the 1992 LA riots, the brutal beating of Rodney King, and decades of documented LAPD brutality against the black community.
So when the jury said not guilty, it wasn't a celebration of murder.
No, absolutely not. It was a proxy victory. It was achieved by a brilliant black attorney, Johnny Cochran, against a deeply corrupt system. It was a moment where the LAPD was finally put on trial and lost.
Fast forward to 2016, and the polling data shifts dramatically. A YouGov poll showed that 50% or more of black Americans now agreed with white Americans on his guilt. What caused that convergence?
Time and media retrospectives. Projects like the Oscar-winning documentary O.J. Made in America and the Emmy-winning series The People v. O.J. Simpson deeply reframed the narrative for a new generation.
They changed the focus.
They moved the focus away from the LAPD's racism and centered it on Simpson himself. They highlighted his history of toxic masculinity, his repeated domestic violence against Nicole Brown, and his extreme wealth privilege.
Which sparks a major realization for me. O.J. spent his whole life avoiding civil rights issues. He lived in wealthy white enclaves, played golf at country clubs, and basically abandoned the black community.
Right.
Until he got arrested and needed them for his trial.
Exactly. And the massive assumption made by white media in 1995 was that the black community's celebration equaled a naive belief in O.J.'s literal, factual innocence. It was a profound misread of the cultural moment. The reality ignored by that assumption was the nuance of intersectionality. O.J. used extreme, almost unfathomable wealth privilege to escape the racial prejudice that his own community suffered from every single day. He bought his way out of the system that oppressed others.
They weren't cheering for O.J. the man, they were cheering against the LAPD. And once the LAPD was removed from the equation decades later and the emotions cooled, everyone looked at the evidence and saw the same guilty man.
Precisely. When you look at it all together, you realize something profound. The evolution of public opinion reveals that the 1995 racial divide was rooted in historical grievances against law enforcement, which resolved into a unified consensus of Simpson's guilt once removed from the immediate context of LAPD corruption.
Okay, we've covered the forensics, the civil trials, the book, the robbery, the sociology. Now that we've unpacked all the facts, consider this final thought. Think back to that broken vase and the glitching security camera from the beginning. What happens to society when the legal truth and the factual truth permanently diverge? If we as a society have to rely on insane media circuses, civil trial workarounds, and bizarre ghost-written books to finally bridge that gap and find the truth, what does that mean for everyday people? What happens to the person navigating the justice system who doesn't have $33 million, a pair of rare Bruno Magli shoes, or a legal dream team? It's something to think about the next time you see a verdict on the news. I want to thank our expert for guiding us through this incredible document, and thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you.